Okay. I chose as a case study, or Richard and I chose as a case study, Pakistan. Now, if you look at it, you'll see that the date of it is 2005. So the reason why I've chosen Pakistan is because it was one of the very few humanitarian responses that I've ever been to where the country, the government, took control right away. Now, normally when we go anywhere, because there's so much chaos, we, the international community, move in. We have lots and lots of experience. We know all about it. And without actually realizing, we take over. There's a problem with that, and I will discuss it tomorrow because we're talking about Haiti, which is where that actually happened. One of the problems, and I can go to Nepal, in Nepal, for example, when we responded to Nepal, the government were very happy for us to give a strong response initially, but then very quickly they wanted to pull it back. And so what happened is that the international community was working well, and then this tug came from the country, the Nepalese government, give it to us, give it to us. We just can't hand over like that. If we do it, it's chaos. And there was chaos, and there was animosity, and there was argument, and whatever. That was the Nepal case. Tomorrow we'll talk about Haiti, which is a bit more chaotic. But this one was an eye-opener for any of us that went there, because as I will prove to you as we go through, the government really said, this is our show. Okay, you guys know what you're doing, but you're going to know what you're doing within the parameters of the government. Okay. So what happened in 2005? There was an earthquake, and the earthquake was up in Kashmir, right? Up in Kashmir. What do we know about Kashmir? It's in the news today. What do we know about it? Okay.
Disputed region.
That's exactly, yeah. I mean, that is exactly it. It is a disputed region. A region who disputed between who and whom?
Pakistan and
India. Pakistan and India, okay. There was a war between them, and what happened is when the war ended, there was no peace treaty, and the Kashmir became this disputed territory. What is very important about Pakistan and India, what do they possess, which makes them very powerful countries? Nuclear weapons, okay, nuclear weapons. Now, if there's a war zone, a disputed war zone, are they likely to deploy and have weapons in that region? Probably, probably, okay. So the very first international reaction to the fact that there was an earthquake taking place in Kashmir, a lot of governments said, oh my God, right? And so you ask the Pakistanis and you ask the Indians, do you have anything up there? What are they going to say?
no.
Either nothing or no, okay? That's the truth. So one of the first big caveats, and something for you to think about in the future, what is the existing situation there that can drastically impinge on your response? Those people who responded to Chernobyl, remember people rushed into Chernobyl, many got illnesses which killed them. And the same thing happened in Fukuyama in Japan. We were a bit slow in knowing the problem and the after effects of the problem. But here what people thought about is, boy oh boy, this is a big earthquake, and it's in an area where there can be nuclear weapons. So that's the first point. So the centre of it was here, a place called Balakot, Mustafabad, around here. That's China. Okay, you've got India here, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. You can see it's an interesting spot to have an earthquake. Okay, so it happened. Now I'm going to put this up. The magnitude was 7.6. Now 7.6 is large. Okay. The Richter scale, it's proportionate, and 7.6 is big. Now it happened at 8:50, 10 minutes to 9, right, on a Saturday morning. Now, in the aid world, whenever an event takes place, one of the things you really want to look at very quickly is what time did it happen? Why? Why do we want to ask ourselves that question?
Understand where people might have been
That's
at
exactly
the time.
it. Okay, is everybody in bed? If it's an earthquake and buildings collapse and it's the middle of the night, most people are in bed. If it's at 10 to 9 on a Saturday morning, Most people who go out to work are at work, right? But you can ask yourself, in a Muslim country, are there as many people at work as there would be on a Monday to Friday, or Monday to Thursday, or whatever? Okay, is it a day off, or what? See, these are things you can work out before you even start to respond. You have some sort of idea of what the problem will be. Yeah. So isolation, possibly nuclear, 7.6, which is massive. 10 to 9 in the morning. Epicenter Mustafalabad, no, he's ever heard of Mustafalabad, no problem at all. But this is what we learned later, right? I'm going to just play a game with me. I want to count 20 seconds, okay? $73,000 people died. Okay. So 20 seconds ago, 73,000 people are alive. 20 seconds later. Now, one of the first things in the aid world is, 72,000 bodies. 73,000 gone. How many grieving people? Okay. So that will give you an idea of what you think, what you're going to expect. It's before you move. Okay, you can get all this before you go. Okay, 105,000 were wounded. Now, in my opinion, I'm a great cynic here. Don't worry about these at all. Okay, we're not interested in those. Sadly, we're very interested in these. Okay, because with anywhere where there's big trauma, where there's earthquakes and whatever, you'll get people who get crush wounds and everything else. And if they're not dealt with very quickly, they get gangrene, and so they die. So they could have been saved if people get there very quickly. So you've got to put how you know for what an earthquake, you're going to get crush wounds. No question about that at all. So, as it so happened, doing the maths and whatever, we knew pretty soon about 105,000 people. 400,000 homes destroyed. Okay? 400,000 homes destroyed. Now, it's a poor area. These will be family homes which have been in possession for donkeys years now. They won't be elegant, they won't be wonderful properties, but they're people's properties. And you say, oh my God. And not all of this you know for some while. But this is the size of the problem. Okay? This is a summary of the size of the problem. Someone's going to look after 105,000 people who are wounded, someone's going to find a solution for 400,000. This is a long-term problem, but debris. Earthquakes, you get enormous debris, okay? And so, what's the problem? The problem with it is you've got to shift it in order to rebuild, or you rebuild from it. But it can make life incredibly difficult. All that page, just first slide. We've now got an idea of what the earthquake has done. Now let's just have a quick look at the affected area, because this again is what we need to know. How are we going to get there? Where is it? Now, we here are, as I say, it's up in Kashmir. These are all valleys, okay? These are all valleys. This is Himalayas, all right? So it's not easy territory. You're talking about valleys. We're talking about towns of Battleground, Balakot. That's the center of the earthquake there. Muzaffarabad, Mansehra, and Bagh. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that for example, World Food Programme and other major agencies, when a crisis occurs, what the logisticians do is get a map out. Okay, you can pretty much work out what your plan is going to be from a map without even getting there. Okay, as long as you've got some idea. Now these days, because of satellite pictures and whatever, it's much easier to get a picture very quickly. But in the past, we say, well, we'll send a recce, or we'll do assessments and all this and that. You can do it in the office in Rome. You can do it in the office in Copenhagen, because you could just look at the maps. Just look at the maps, and you can say, okay, how difficult is it going to be? Now, one of the things that we discovered here is that 5,000 feet is a crucial height, because at a certain time of the year, which was incidentally going to be about 4 weeks after the earthquake, right? the snow comes down as far as 5,000 feet. So above 5,000 feet, it's snowed in. And therefore, any aid you think you're going to get in, you've got to get in before the 5,000, before the snow comes down, okay? And you just think that's what you're told by everybody. And that happens every single year. So here's the problem, concentrates the mind. How much time have we got before the snow comes down, right? Now, below the snow, below the snow line, right, there was every possibility that a lot of people would move out, okay, or want to move away. Two things. First of all, they're frightened of aftershocks. There weren't many. There were not many here, okay, not many. But people are frightened of aftershocks. What are aftershocks? What happens is enormous numbers go. So what you've got 800,000 people here, 800,000 people who are, do I come, do I go, do I stay, do I move, or whatever. Now all of this, you can pretty much, you can get from previous experience, or you can get off the map, okay? So these became the facts for us. Let me just show you some pictures so that it gives you some idea. This guy's obviously been to a clinic where his little kid's being bandaged, and he's looking down on his village, okay? Boom. Now wherever his home is, as you can see, not a lot of it left, okay? Not a lot of it left. This is battleground, this is the main road. This is interesting here, because some people die in the most strangest ways, sadly. There are a lot of houses along here. A lot of houses along here. And so when the earthquake shook, it shook the side of this bank, which is a cliff. And a lot of houses just slid down into the water when people drowned. And that's really bad luck if you drown in an earthquake. Everything else is fine, but you go down with your house and you drown in another town. These are problems. Okay. You get some poignant stories, and I put this photograph up because to me, I remember talking this one. This truck is destroyed. Okay, it's an earthquake. Guys, truck's destroyed. There's nothing really. He could have lost his mum, dad, and everybody else. He bought that truck on the hire purchase, okay? And he bought it in the belief that he could pay the installments by work that he would do with the truck, okay? With the truck. Truck never move again, okay? So you can pay for the next 2 or 3 years for a truck which he can't use, and he's got to find the money to pay for the truck because the guys who gave him the money will be on his tail for sure, okay? And that's why he's standing there so despondent. His livelihood's gone, his truck's gone, and he is probably incredibly depressed. I put this slide up because it illustrates something which is, again, culture is a very important issue whenever we respond to any crisis, okay? To any crisis. Now, you're looking at this, we talked a fair bit about culture yesterday with our St. James's exercise. Who are the people, how do they work, and whatever. What is culturally interesting for me this year is that we issued tents very quickly. We talk about that in a few minutes. We issued tents. Now, these are properties here, which this lot is being damaged. This lot is still standing here. And these people here are from up here, and in this case are from down here, but they're relatives of these people. But what we discovered in Kashmir is that people like to keep their distance, even though you're a best neighbor, okay? You keep your distance. So this is the same family, but it's a different wing of the family. So they wouldn't move in with these, and these people wouldn't move in with them. They wanted to be separate, even though there was a crisis. It's cultural issue, which we have to take into consideration. I put these 4 pictures in. The bottom one is the first one I want to show you. One of the things that I said to you on day 1, I say to everybody, is you have to know when you move into anywhere. When we did the logistics, I said to you, find out what the locals use. Okay. Now you can see that the locals use this. That's a local truck. You can see the width of the road. Okay. Now we brought in these. Now these are wider. Okay. Now they may only be a few inches wider, but that few inches really is terrifying when you're going on this road. It's terrifying. Okay. We would have been much better off purchasing and bringing in these things. Now, but some agencies brought in trucks. You go, oh, trucks, never going to move. Never ever going to move. It's simple as that, okay? And these are, again, illustrations of the road. This one here, what happened is our vehicle was here, right? And we see this, and you think to yourself, what's around the corner? You don't just motor up and go around the corner because there may be nothing around the corner. It's as simple as that. Go stop and get somebody who's fit to walk up there, go and have a look and say, oh yeah, it's okay, or oh, we don't go any further.
Is it two-way or one-way?
So yeah,
is it one way?
That's
one way.
It's
One
the only
way.
The only way to go.
Anyway, so no one's coming down.
No, absolutely right. Yeah. So the trucks get down. The only thing is, of course, at this time, not much coming down. Okay, because of the damage of the earthquake, not much, thank God, coming down. So the earliest days, it's two-way traffic, but it was only mainly going up with us. Okay, but some did come down, and then you have to find spots like this here, where the road has been, where they've either dug in or it's wide enough to halt. And so sometimes you have to reverse back. That's fun. Okay? You really have to be confident in that. But anyway, I'll go on to this one here. Always tickled me. The government issued an edict which said, please be careful, look out for overhanging rocks which may fall onto the road and therefore kill trucks going up. And some overzealous people, in my opinion, right, thought that these might be overhanging rocks. Okay? Now, A, they're not overhanging rocks. But also, if you were trying to pull on those rocks, do you think you'd all sit around and have a look at it? Okay? I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable. Okay, but that was it. That was it. This here, what's interesting about this is the side of the hill here has come down into the river. And what happens here then? It's a flowing river.
It's a flood.
Exactly. On this side it floods, and it dries up on the other. Okay, but not only that, you've got this worry. What happens when this gets so strong that it bursts its way through here? Okay, these are all problems which you clock in your head and say, so if we don't do something about this, there's going to be another problem. We're going to have another problem. So that's early days, early days. So we had on my logistics lesson, we asked ourselves, okay, what do we need to know? What do we need to assess? So we, the aid world, were beginning to respond, and we're asking ourselves the following questions. What's the severity of the situation? Okay, now we've got a pretty good idea of, because it's 7.6, we've got a pretty good idea of the damage, we've got a pretty good idea of the casualties, and so on. Okay, fine. What are the resources in place? Now, if it had happened in the capital, Islamabad, obviously there's going to be different resources available than there are up in Kashmir. I mean, Kashmir, they're just small, isolated towns which got all the resources which they required from Islamabad, or they were self-sufficient. Simple as that, okay? So what are the likelihood of resources being in place? If you know for what has been massive damage there, fields, warehouses, all that sort of stuff would have been damaged. Next one, what are the needs of the population? I always ask this, what do you think is the greatest need of the population? What do they really, really want more than anything else?
Safety. I mean, like a little place of safety.
Safety. They want to feel safe. That's the most, we always say, oh, they want food, they want water, they want this, they want that. Initially, they want to know that they're safe. They want someone to say, okay, it's unlikely there's going to be another one or whatever. They want to feel safe. And so many of them will shift away from the center of where the earthquake was. They'll shift away from high buildings. They go out into fields. They go anywhere where they feel safe. That's what they really want more than anything, okay? And only with as confidence builds up will they overcome this fear of it happening again. Yep, simple as that. So, needs of the population, all the other things, impact of our intervention. We had a good session on this a couple of days ago, anyway. What is going to be? What will be the impact of our intervention? What do we hope that 6 weeks later or whatever we can say, this we've done? Well, give me some ideas. Are we likely to rebuild Kashmir? No, okay. What are we likely to do then?
Treat the injured.
Good one. Very good one. Yeah.
Set up some shelter.
Yeah. Very good.
Essentials.
Yeah, provide water, you're absolutely on the right lines, okay? That's what we would hope. Our impact would be that, and you might say to yourself, As a result of that, how long do you think the emergency phase would stay there? The people that first responded, how long do you think we would stay there? I guess.
For this one?
Yeah. How long is the initial response? How we come, we're sitting in the office in Geneva, or you're sitting in the office in British Red Cross, or whatever it is, and you get called out, you go onto the Hercules, and you go out to Islamabad, and from there, you're going to be there for 6 months, 6 years, or whatever. What do you think?
2 months?
Yes, but you're in the right sort of ballpark. I mean, that's either a month, or probably maximum 3 months. Okay, that's what you would say. Because by then, it's no longer an emergency. Okay, it's moved into the next phase. But you're more, I would think myself, work on a month initially, right? And then see what happens after that. Progress towards benchmarks. We said this before in my logistics lesson. What you need to know is where should we be and doing your exercise. We did it only yesterday for the exercise. Where should you be after week 1? Where should you be after week 2? And then you've got to gauge to see how you're doing. Are we falling behind it? Are we getting ahead of it? Are we doing well? Are we doing badly? Have we got the right resources? Have we got the right people? Are we making the right decisions? And you can check it because of your benchmarks and standards. Okay. Next one is, what is the likelihood of the deterioration of the situation? Always in a war zone, you always think it's going to get worse. Okay, if it gets worse, but it gets better. In the case of natural disasters, what you hope is it's likely to get better. Simple as that. Now, aftershocks are the big killer with earthquakes. Okay, aftershocks, the biggest one. You can be doing really well, and then boom, another one comes, which may be smaller, but because of the damage that's been done, it sets back all we've done so far. And not only that, we'll probably catch all the aid workers as well. I mean, that's one of the big problems. So you worry about that. Exit strategy. We're not going to say that until Kashmir is at peace and Kashmir has been rebuilt. Your exit strategy, which you will do on day one. We do right from the start. We're going to go there with these resources, and we're going to come out. You're in charge, so you said 8 weeks. So we said to ourselves, 8 weeks we are coming out. And therefore, all of this has to be done on an 8-week framework, and we keep on remembering. Because the other thing we're going to do with our exit strategy, who are we going to hand over to? That's because you can't just pick up and go. You've got to hand over to somebody, right? Normally, hopefully, the government. Okay, next one. Now, this is where Pakistan was different than anything else that I had been involved in up until then. When we got there, the Pakistan government, which was, of course, a military dictatorship, and best must remember that. It not in name, but it was in truth. In fact, it was a military dictatorship. And so the government had a strong say. And they had a strong say because they had a very strong army. And so President Musharraf, right from the very start, deployed engineers. Now we had the ideal people to respond in the case of earthquakes. Okay, ideal people. So his engineer divisions, and we're talking how many people in a division? Can you remind me of it roughly?
So a division is 3 brigades, and a brigade is 5,000, so 15,000 people.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. I mean, these are engineers. Now, what have engineers got? Engineering equipment. Okay, what do you need for this thing? Engineering equipment. What's the big problem? Getting it up there. Okay, getting it up there. You see the side of the roads. Okay, so with all the wood in the world, and with heavy engineering equipment, you can't fly it in. Okay. Now, another point which I'll raise here just before, because it is important. If you're responding to an isolated area, right? When you first land, and you may be in, everybody flew into Islamabad, right? When you're in Islamabad, you're closer than you were when you were in London, but you're not in Kashmir, right? And the information that you're getting it may be more difficult to get it because it's more chaotic in Islamabad than it was in London. So initially, I can tell you, first maybe 7 to 10 days of the response, not a lot of people had any idea what was going on, where the earthquake had taken place. Worse still, a huge hotel had collapsed in Islamabad. Now, it collapsed because it was on the absolute periphery of the earthquake shake. Okay? But it was made, and the building had been put up cheaply with poor concrete, and that's what caused it to come down. Nothing else came down. Okay? And in fact, the guy that built it said, yeah, well, it wasn't, he was to jail for it, okay, cheated everybody, and a lot of people died. But the point about it was, initially people thought that was the epicenter of the earthquake. And so the journalists and everybody came in, could file a story from, get off the plane in Islamabad, go to this hotel which is collapsed, take a few photographs, have a stand in front of it, you know, big a voiceover and whatever, and away they went. And it was some time before people went, hey, wait a minute guys, it's up there. It's up there, for God's sake, okay? Oh, how do we get there? And the answer is, it's only with great difficulty. So it took a little while before we non-Pakistan military began to get up there. The other interesting thing which is that initially you get some idea of what's going on because of mobile phones, right? What happens, what is disastrous about a mobile phone?
Battery down.
Batteries, okay? And so it depended on what battery level people had, okay? And once the battery's gone, gone.
And then it worked.
No, you're all gone. I mean, everything's down. Everything's down, okay? I mean, you're very lucky to get any communications at all, but at least if you've got some communications, it only exists as long as the batteries are there, okay? That's the biggest problem. So, they get a hold of this quickly, and Musharraf says, we're going to have integrating information for situational analysis. We are going to be the guys who can do it. And this was strange to us, because we're saying, hey, we want the elbow room here, okay? We're the experts. And he said, you're not the experts. He said, we are Pakistan, we are the army, we're the experts, you'll do what we say. New lesson for us, okay? Now, in we came in with a lot of people. I just clicked here. These are the people that we brought in, okay? We brought in 86 international NGOs. That's a massive response. 86 international. We brought in ICRC and IFRC. ICRC were up there already. Obviously, Pakistan Red Crescent was there already. There were 115 national NGOs. And obviously, they are there. Oh, well, just going on this one here, the 150, it is so easy when you're international response to forget about these people. Because they're little, they're mom and pop organizations, they've got small funding, right? But they do great work. And they speak the language, okay? They know the land. But we tend just to forget about them, 150. Who is it? It's, I'm too busy, You're not too busy, you're never too busy. Bring them in, because they know what's going on. We got donors from 20 countries. 20 countries said, yep, we will send money. We got NATO. Okay, what's that NATO stand for? What's NATO stand for?
North Treaty Organisation.
Where's the Atlantic? Okay, why on earth would we get 20 donors? Why on earth would we get NATO? Why on earth would the Americans come flooding in with medical teams and helicopters? Reason? Say again?
Stability.
Say again?
It's political.
It's political. And the reason why it's political is because Musharraf was the only person who was opposing Taliban. Okay? And therefore we owed him. Okay? And we needed to show solidarity to him. You're helping us enormously, we're going to help you. Okay? And he was a military man. He'd been educated in both Britain and in America. He'd been to staff colleges and whatever else. He knew the language, he knew the people. And he said, call in time, okay? It's called in time. And so all of these, now at that time, NATO didn't have a role. It was doing nothing, okay? And so it said, well, let's forget the A bit, okay? We'll just go. And they were very, very good. Now I will tell you that when NATO came in, the generals who were underneath Musharraf said, no, we don't want them in. Why don't we want them in? Because it's a war zone. We don't want NATO traipsing all over Kashmir because we've never let anybody in. Nobody knows where our camps are. Nobody knows where our weapons are. And we're not having NATO trample all over them. So Musharraf, who'd made this big decision to have them in, had to sit down with the military and say, oh, okay, let's have them in for 12 weeks. So actually they were there for 12 weeks. Now they could have been there for much longer and it would have been very, very beneficial if they'd been there longer. But the generals who had power, right, Musharraf could not afford to override the generals, He had overridden them initially to get NATO in, but then they said, that's it. And we will watch what NATO is doing, okay? And certainly they did. To go anywhere, you need permission, okay? And therefore, you could actually draw a map of where the sensitive stuff was, because the area they won't give you permission to go to. That would have been better off saying, oh, go anywhere you like, okay? America produced helicopters, and they produced medical teams. We'll come back to that in a second. I just want to go back to here. We very quickly established ourselves, this is through Icrc, whom I was with. We, first of all, had a headquarters in Islamabad, obviously, where in the capital, you have a headquarters there, so you can deal with the generals. And we decided to have operational centres in Bagh, Muzaffarabad, Mansiyah, and Bathagram. You saw the map before, right? And we would have 9 logistic hubs. Now, the interesting thing is, all of this we did off the map before we got there. Because that's, you know, people want to make a big fuss, oh, you have to go out recce. If there are 1, 2, 3, 4 big towns, they're obviously going to be your operational centres. Okay? There's no magic about this. No magic at all. But some people want to make magic out of something which is actually a dead easy decision. And the EDPs, the logistic hubs, are where you can land a helicopter, where you can land an aeroplane. It's as simple as that, okay? But you can do it off the map. You don't have to say, well, we're going to send a team up there, they'll come back and tell us what's going on. No, do it with the map. Easy. So on we go with this here. Now, this is where we began to have fun. And this is the bit I want to sort of emphasize the whole purpose of this particular lecture. In the past, and even today, we can move in, Icrc sets up, right, all the things that Richard's talked to you about, okay, sets up all these headquarters and everybody gets moving, everybody gets out and everybody's doing everything, okay, and occasionally we let the government know what's going on, okay, occasionally we let the government know. Here, the government said right away, okay, you've got the UN, we've got independent agencies, and we've got us. And this is us, and see where we are. We're in the middle, okay? We are in the middle, no question about that. We're going to set up a Federal Relief Commission. Now that was a masterstroke, which has been repeated now in many crises after this. Governments have set up something which they call the Federal Relief Commission or some relief commission, National Relief Commission or whatever. It was a brilliant idea, What made it so unique in Pakistan is that normally if you set up a relief commission, civil administration and the military support, right? Not in Pakistan. In Pakistan military, everything else in support. So it meant that the very first meeting that I went to, and I represented this lot, on the Federal Relief Commission, when we went there, everywhere I've been before, you've got the Minister of Health, you've got the Minister of Culture, you've got the Minister of this, Minister of that, Minister of the other. At these meetings, you had the General who was in charge of the medical services, you had everyone was a General, and sitting behind him was the Civilian Minister. Now that was strange and unusual, okay? But let us know right from the start whose show this is. And sitting up here were 2 major generals, and they were in charge of the whole thing. And they were very, very clever. They had a General Nasty and a General Nice. Okay, it's as simple as that. And the meeting was always chaired by General Nasty. Okay, and then if you want to get anything done, you would have to go and see General Nice. Simple as that. General Nice has been to every sort of all of his courses. Have been in America. He was very urbane, well-educated, very civilized person. This chap was from Kashmir. General Nasty was born in Kashmir. Okay, knew the area, knew the territory, knew the problem, knew the army. Okay, and also was very cynical about where we were going to be tramping and traipsing. There's no question about that at all. So we knew exactly where we stood and how we were going to get things done right from the start. In the UN, we had the Humanitarian coordinator, and he had 2 deputy coordinators. I was one of the deputy coordinators. A chap called Jimmy McGoldrick was the other. Jimmy McGoldrick is now running the Middle East. MENA is called, Middle East, North Africa. Before that, he ran Yemen, and before that, he was in Afghanistan, and he's done a lot of stuff, okay? But his very first senior post was here with myself. And I can tell the story here because this chap here, the UN senior representative in any country is called the resident representative and always comes to United Nations Development Programme, which Richard talked to you about on day one, UNDP. Now, the UNDP resident representative is normally an old hand in the UN. They can come from any agency, and they tend to, in the past, they can come from any division in any of the agencies, okay? I'll hold that there for now. This gentleman here was the Chief Finance Officer of UNICEF. So it was one of UNICEF's appointments was to have Pakistan, okay? Now he was brilliant at balancing the books. Keep the book up. Nobody had any idea whether he knew how to cope with the crisis, because he never coped with the crisis. And that's why he got two old hands as his deputies, okay? Simple as that. And so my job and Jeremy McGoldrick's job was to really hold his hand. Now what was fascinating is we held his hand for about a week and then discovered this guy was really, really good, okay? There's no doubt about it. And he took over. And it became a nice triangle. He was the boss, and we did what we were told by him. He just had that ability to see what the problem was and get it done. He was a marvelous diplomat as well. So he was superb. So that was this over here. Then we had initially had JLC, came out UN JLC, and we had the cluster system, right? Now, what is interesting about this? This was the first implementation of the cluster system. Okay, the very first time the cluster system was used. And I can tell you, this is an absolutely true story. Jan Egeland was the man at the time, was the emergency relief coordinator for the United Nations, sitting in New York, running the whole show. And he rang us up on the phone. And I answered the phone. And he said, Larry, he said, I want you to implement the cluster system. I said, oh, right, sir, okay, sir, no problem, sir. Put the phone down. I said, Jeremy McGoldrick, what's the cluster system? And Jeremy said, no idea. It's not that. So we had to run around and find out what the cluster system was. It was an idea which had been concocted in New York, hadn't been practiced anywhere. And so it was the pilot scheme. We had no idea. Anyway, we started to get the cluster system going, and it worked quite well, actually. It worked quite well. So that was us. Now, this was important. These guys, all the NGOs, always want to be independent. Okay? At least there's always some sort of hierarchical system in the UN. Okay? There's not always a hierarchical system with NGOs. And so here we had the international, we had the humanitarian community, we had the Red Cross, Red Crescent, ICRC itself. Now, ICRC were fascinating because what's the role of ICRC? The role of ICRC in particular is to operate in war zones. Okay, it's the only agency that has the task of operating in war zones. What was Kashmir? War zone. So it was the only agency that had already been there. Okay, it knew every inch of Kashmir because it was the only agency able to get around. But of course, its three tenets are neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So it wouldn't discuss with the rest of us, okay, you can go there or you can't. I mean, it knew where everything was, but it wasn't saying. Now, it probably was saying it to the Secretary General, but it wasn't saying it would have ruined its role if it had said, don't go there because we think that's where the nuclear reactor is, or don't go there because of this. It couldn't do. Okay, but they were able to say to us, if you want a route there, this is the best route. You go over there and underneath there and what, because they've been everywhere there. Everywhere. ICRC. Interestingly, we then had all the other NGOs, and I told you 87 of them, whatever it was, okay. Then we had the Islamic elements, okay, all the Islamic response. Now, Islamic relief is really superb. I mean, they've got money, okay, they've got money. They also buy that same religion, and they're pretty good at what they do, okay, pretty good at what they do. the government here wanted to make sure they didn't do too much. Ah, okay.
For a break, 5 minutes.
For a break? Okay.
In a break, 5
Okay,
minutes.
superb. So this was, the government were quite careful about what Islamic relief could do and could not do, because they didn't want to do it too much. In other words, it didn't want to be radicalized. I mean, it was simple. It was very wide about that. So, who's got the clicker? Me? I've got the clicker. Good. Good. On we go. On we go. Now, these are the sort of problems that we had. These are the problems. I told you how many homes were destroyed. We needed 800,000 tents. Okay? I want you to wrap around the 800,000 tents. Now, your first question to me is what? When do you want them, sir? Okay, when do I want them? Now? Yesterday? I want them yesterday. Okay? So don't give any hassle. Just go out and get me 800,000 tents now. Is it possible?
No.
No.
I'm an optimist.
Every word. Okay, and I'll come on to how we solve it. At the same time, of course, we've got these people who are about 5,000 feet, remember? And so what we've got to try and do, these people are going to still be above 5,000 feet as long as we get some stuff to them before the snow comes down. What we decided we'd do, we'd build a corrugated tin shelter for them, okay? Corrugated, which we called a one-room complex. And of course, that one room would have to take in the goats, the sheep, the cows, the cattle, and everybody else, okay? So we needed to grow them. We needed 333,000 shelters, shelter pieces, okay? Right? 7.9 million of the Wrigley tin bits. 7.9 million. I'm asking if you're going to do that job for me. Okay, can you get them for me?
No.
No? When do you think you might be able to get them for me?
Ooh.
How long do you think it might take?
2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. What do I do with all these 800,000 people I've got? Okay, right. We needed shelter kits. This was the beauty. We needed 6.1 million blankets. Right, that's your job.
I don't have any.
You're not even trying.
I don't want to be defeatist. These people are shivering, okay? Where's your humanitarian heart? These people are shivering. That's what I want. Now, okay, now, where do we get them from? Plastic sheet. I mean, there's lots and lots of plastic sheets available. We've got lots of plastic sheeting. The biggest problem with plastic sheeting is heavy. It's very, very heavy to
The
bring.
plastic is to cover.
The big one. Even because you can make it, you can do up windows, you can do roofs, you can do anything with plastic sheeting. Incidentally, in East Timor, when I issued out plastic sheeting, we issued it out to cover the roof. What people did, I thought was very, very clever. Actually, they laid it on the floor, so at night time they got underneath it. Why put it on the roof? It's going to flap and move around. Just put it on the floor, and if you get cold, if you get wet, you just go underneath the sheet. I thought very clever use.
Sorry, Larry. Just a question. I mean, given all these disasters around the world and earthquakes and all of that,
Other disasters as well.
isn't there like a recognized kind of or accredited sources where your organization and other organizations know that if we are in Pakistan,
Absolutely right.
these are the closest places to get them.
Absolutely right.
So why do you? I mean, like it feels like every time something happens, they have to redo the thinking from the start and ask all the basic questions.
But the only outcome of this is what I said to you yesterday. We now have 5 major warehouses. Okay, so these big, huge warehouses which are around the globe, okay, are now filled with some of this gear, right? And some of it is held, which is earmarked for agencies. UNHCR has bought it and placed it in there, okay? But if it doesn't need it and there was a crisis, it could loan it to somebody else, okay? Or it's been bought by Red Cross, or it's been bought by the Islamic Relief, or whatever. But they're all in these in these 5 warehouses. So that's come out of it, which is a real bonus. When it doesn't help, don't break my sir.
Finish your
Okay,
sentence.
what doesn't help is that, I need these now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the problem. Now, I'll just take the point of interest. I'll take the blankets. Because the blankets, they really are urgent. People got nothing. It's cold. It's very, very cold. So how do we get the blankets? The first thing we did was to raid every shop imaginable. Okay, every shop everywhere to try and buy blankets. Simple as that. You don't get that many at all. You don't. We discovered that there were 2 sources of blankets. 2 sources of blankets where we could have solved the problem, not partially solved the problem. One was South Africa. Freight from South Africa to Kashmir, difficult. and expensive, okay? But the second place, great producer of blankets,
India?
India. Do you think the Pakistanis want Indian blankets?
No.
No way.
Freeze to death, but not get.
Absolutely right. Okay, this is good news. You're being locked in, so I have a deal with this guy. He's going to let you out at
He just
midday.
wants to give us a break.
That's your chance to get out. Do it right now.
So anyway, they wouldn't have Indian blankets. What you can do, of course, be very, very devious. Not that I will admit that we did it, right? You can just ship the blankets from India to somewhere else and take them in as if they've never been in India in their life. But you will tell a story about togging.
Ah, but it's your story.
Oh, okay.
I just love this. I think it's
The
brilliant.
thing about blankets is we got blankets in from everywhere. Okay, one of the great sources we got blankets from, I'll tell you now, is we actually went around Europe and said, okay, military got blankets, and it just so happened that the German army were about to replenish all their blankets, and they said, okay, we'll give you all the old blankets because we're going to have new blankets here. There will be a gap for blankets in German army, but the need is greater in Kashmir. When the blankets came, we go blanket you, blanket you, blanket you, blanket you, and some person would go, it's a bit thin, this one. So they go and have a look at yours, right? And then they discovered that blankets are sold in what's known as tog weight, okay? So 1 tog or 2 tog. And then they'd be looking at them, what tog is this? Oh, mine's 1, yours is 2. And they come here, I want 2 blankets. Why do you want 2 blankets? I want 2 blankets because he's got a 2 tog. And this was it. And we had people arguing and fighting over the togs of blankets. I'd never heard of the togs of blankets, but it's a problem. And if you've got nothing else to do all day but worry, as those people who were homeless and everything else was, togging became a great issue. Okay, give us 2, give us 2, give us 1. Okay, I pause. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I want to just a couple of seconds now is to apply this to the exercise that you're doing. Because one of the things that happened in Pakistan is that when we sat around the big table with the generals sitting at the top here, okay, first thing which is very important, and in your situation, you are going to have 2 people sitting at the top end of the table here who are from the government, yes, who are from the government. Now, in the case of the 2 Pakistani generals, when it came to this here, they were very good at telling us what we couldn't do, right? But not very good necessarily in producing a lot of the goodies. And so they felt that this was definitely our task. And so when we sat down, twice a week, the meeting, twice a week we would sit down and they would say to me, how many of the tents have you got? Okay, how many blankets have you got? Now I can tell you at some stage, the General Nasty was very interesting. He introduced a system which really, I great argument with him. He would say, okay, this is your task. Don't come back until you've achieved it. I don't want you coming back and sitting in this meeting if you haven't achieved what I just asked you to do. Now, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, that is ridiculous, And of course, we said, you can't do this. We are the UN. You're not treating us like kids. We are the UN. If you like, we'll pick up the ball and we'll walk away with it. And you can play with your own ball. I mean, it's as simple as that. Okay? So we had to be tough with it. But you've got this exercise, and in your exercise this afternoon, you're talking about shelter, right? So when it comes to meetings, you have to ask yourselves, what sort of shelter do you think you're talking about? You have said, okay, we're going to give the shelter task to the log, whatever. Yes, that's what you said. Is it your task to give it to the military that's there? I mean, who are you? And if you give it to the military, is it their task or is it the government's task? Where are they going to get the stuff that you're talking about at these meetings which you're having, okay? And it's the same with all of those things. Anything that you talk about, you need all the logistics bit. Where's it coming from? Are you providing it to them? Are they providing it for you? Is the government responsibility? Should they be providing it for you to provide to them? Who provides it? Who funds it? Okay, these are questions that you really do need to know. On we go. Okay, these are just examples of tents. Now, I told you, we got tents from everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. The best tents we got were these from China. They sold them to us actually very cheaply. They donate some and they give some, okay? And these, apparently, if you speak Chinese, it just says gift from China. We weren't too sure. He could have said something really, naughty. We weren't too sure at all. So we had to be very careful about that. But anyway, they were superb tents. These are the other things that we've been able to buy here, there, and everywhere. This one has got, you're able to put a stove in there. Now, the problem with the stove inside the tent is what? What's the problem? Fire.
Yeah.
Fire is the first one, and asphyxiation is the other, okay? And so, would you believe, above 5,000 feet, whatever it was, the government said, we forbid the issue of stoves. Okay, we forbid them. Because they knew for well, I mean, you can have damage and whatever. Especially if you have really big tents where you're feeding people in them, and all of a sudden, woof, up they go. So they just said, okay, no heating in tents at all. Government decision. Again, I put this up very simply because people said, the tents you're giving to us are non-winterized. Now we're scouring the world for tents, okay? So we're getting any tent that we get a hold of, get our hands on, basically. You need to be able to stand up in it. It's no good getting these small. I mean, they're good. I mean, you can put people in them, but people don't want them. So you're getting tents people can stand up in. Well, and we said, what the hell is the difference between the winterized and non-winterized? Winterized actually has got 2 layers. That's all. It was very simple. We discovered it had 2 skins. As simple as that. It's more expensive. Okay, it's more expensive. But we'll take anything. We'll take absolutely anything. There's the 2 skins, as you can see. We'll take anything. The problem with tents is in a place like Pakistan, right, or up in Kashmir, wind, it makes brand new tents look like this within a very short space of time. And the best you can get out of a tent would be about 6 months. If you got 6 months out of it, you're really, really lucky. Okay? Because you know with a tent, the first rip, and then the wind gets in and it rips more and more and more. So that was a big problem we had. The other thing is, I think we're talking about tents. I'll move on a second. Above 5,000 feet, these are the shelters. So what we're trying to do above 5,000 feet is what is the cheapest, quickest way of being able to produce shelter. So we use, this design is superb, sloping roof. The snow will slide off it. All you need is sandbags, right? And you need these frames. So bits of wood, Wrigley tent, I never thought that. Okay, this is the next one. This is the next design. This is the one room concept. This was the simplest one we did, and actually I think the most successful one. It has sandbags. A little aside story here. We issued sandbags, and we said, okay, this is all the equipment. And the Kashmiri said, you must film them. We said, hang on, we're providing the sand. Oh, no, you're supposed to be producing these shelters. You must fill the shelter, fill the sandbags. And an enormous argument. And people wanted to watch us and fill sandbags. So we just said, please, just why we don't do it down. There's the sandbag. It's up to you. The problem is, it's very rocky, as you can see. It was a major task to fill the sandbags. Never, it was a task to get on with it. This was the most successful one. We used actually Wrigley tent all the way around. Okay, it was very good. Not so much of a sloping roof, and you can see the problem. It doesn't take long before the weight of the snow may well get through that. This was a ridiculous idea. Somebody said, okay, when the snow melts, you're going to get flash floods. If you get flash floods, you need to have these things on stilts. There's no way in the world those stilts so resist.
It's actually more risky there, sorry.
More risky. It was a ridiculous idea. And so what happened is people built tents. People have got initiatives. Simple.
True story.
Easy. Camp management. This is an interesting story. Pakistan again. Pakistan in charge. And so it said, okay, we're going to tell you where your refugee camp is going to be. These camps, and people call them refugee camps, but displaced camps. They're not refugees, they come across the border. Okay, so they are displaced. They said, okay, you can have camps here, 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 here. And they nominated places, right? They nominated 26 planned camps, and almost all of them were in football stadiums. Okay, large football stadium. What's the advantage of a large football stadium? It's got a fence. So what they wanted was the people containing, even though they're their own people. Okay, so we want them in there and don't let them out. We don't want them coming to Islamabad. We don't want them suddenly becoming citrified or gentrified or whatever else. We want them to stay as Kashmiris in this area, and we're going to put policemen and guards on the gate. And that's precisely what they did. Okay, so they nominated 26 locations as planned camps. Now, a lot of people didn't want to go to a planned camp. What they wanted to do was have a little camp nearby the remnants of their houses, so that every day they could go back and do some work, back and forward, back and forwards. So the population created 118 spontaneous camps. And the government said, close them. We're not having spontaneous camps. And we said, well, hey, we can't close them. They said, we can close them. But we said, these people are, I can understand the reasoning why they want to be where they are. They're actually rebuilding their houses. And the government said, no, you can't have them. So we said, okay, we'll just say yes, but we'll help them, right? And the government then issued an edict that we, the international community, were not to offer any resources whatsoever to the spontaneous camps. So you could live in a spontaneous camp, but you wouldn't get food, you wouldn't get water, you wouldn't get any of the resources. Now, let me tell you here, this was a great mistake. It was a great mistake, because this is where some of the Islamic agencies, right, Pakistan, Islamic agencies, said, don't worry, we'll feed them. Okay? And so they got in there, but in the 118 spontaneous camps, you could recognize immediately all the women were in powder. Okay? Green flag, in powder, and the food came in from Islamic agencies. Okay, so strong Islamic agencies. Government then had a battle, tried to close them down, tried to move them on, all this, but that was an internal battle, thank God we didn't have to get involved in. But it was a mistake, I think, on behalf of the Pakistani government. But of course, bearing in mind, they're on the border with Afghanistan. And so they needed to try and contain this Islamic strength. Contingency plans, this was something which logisticians worried us. The government said to us, okay, if in fact these people who are above 5,000 feet, okay, and if they come down, maybe 100,000 of them, if it's too cold up there, right, they'll come down. When they come down, we do not want them overcrowding the camps, and we do not want them moving into the city. So we want you, the United Nations, to have contingency stocks for 60,000 people. For a camp for 60,000 people. That's wrong. One camp for 60,000 people. Now the problem was, as you can imagine, I couldn't get enough stuff for the ones that we had without saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're not going to issue a stock because we're going to keep it for 60,000. Just didn't make sense. Made sense to the government, didn't make sense to us at all. And then we had to play games. And playing games with government, a good idea, you can get kicked out. So that was one of the big issues that we had. How do we get round this? Health. This was fascinating. If it's a big crisis and it gets good publicity, all the medical agencies in the world want to be there. They want to be there because of fundraising. Simple as that. Like, we are responding now to Yemen. We're responding to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We are responding to flags, propaganda, whatever it is, just so they get more and more funding. You've seen all the television adverts, okay? So all agencies want to be there. This was the big issue. This was Pakistan. All the cameras were there. Everybody was aware of the political situation here. So, would you believe we got 44 international field hospitals? We got 44 countries responded, and we were able to build 24 field hospitals. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, that Kashmir never seen anything like it. But that's the truth. I mean, Kashmir, they're monitoring the hospitals, and all of a sudden, it's got 24 field hospitals. It was an overreaction, but a very good overreaction, because what happened as a result of it, we were able, for the very first time, to vaccinate 1.2 million children. Now, in the past, the Pakistanis had always said, you can't go up there, you can't vaccinate kids. Golden opportunity. So UNICEF never even asked. It just fed the jabs to these people, and as kids came in, they were jab, and 1.2 million were vaccinated. It's absolutely superb. This is one of the first crises where we got it right as far as mental health is concerned. Do you think there's trauma? Do you think there's drama? Do you think there's, tension, stress? Obviously, yeah. With how many people? With everyone. Okay, everyone. Somebody's lost somebody. Somebody's lost a house. They've lost a job. All the things you can imagine that they have lost, and they have no idea when they're going to get them back. When's my house going to be built? When's my job going to go? When's the school going to start? All of those things. So we sent in 27 mental health teams, and they were really superb. Very first time, 125 psychosocial staff. Really, really good. One of the problems with psychosocial staff is that some countries think, oh, you're saying they were all lunatics. Some people have got the wrong idea, the wrong impression about exactly what psychosocial work is. And they can't quantify it. What does a psychosocial worker do? It's almost as if it's voodoo, you know. Oh, okay. So you have to try and convince some people. This, to me, was where I would always put my money, and I learned it there, and I've always used it ever since. Mobile health teams. Mobile health team is a Land Rover, a nurse, and a box of tablets. Okay, and they get them to go out, out, out. What we did here with them is we used helicopters, and so we would take them to one village, drop them off, the mobile health team, right? And then the following day, we pick them up, take them to another one, having dropped another one off, and we were just dropping these teams off all around the place and replenishing their drugs. It was absolutely superb what they were able to do. 438 deliveries, cesarean sections, all sorts of kit, and you're talking about just 2 or 3 people in a Land Rover or in a small team. Really cheap and effective. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Put my money in that every time. You've got a health problem in your exercise this afternoon? Think about it, okay? Think about it. The same that we just talked about there, think about camp management. Think about who is going to be in charge of these camps. It's a very important issue. You're going to be in charge? Is the government going to be in charge? Who's going to be in charge of these camps? Now, you're the experts, not the military you're bringing in. So how are you going to liaise with the government? Are you going to be in charge? They're going to be in charge, okay? Field hospitals, food and nutrition. This afternoon for the exercise, are you providing food? Okay, are you providing it? If you're providing, where's it coming from? How are you going to deliver it? You're going to tell me again, you're going to give it the logistics section. If so far you're giving lots of logistics section, okay. Have they got their resources? Have they got the whatever? WFP distributed 95% of its target, which was 1 million. Now that's a lot to feed 1 million people. Actually, the people that were altogether we needed to feed 2.2 million. 2.2. And what the government did, very cleverly, it said, okay, World Food Programme, you're the world experts at this, we'll give you 1 million and we'll do 1.2 million. And your WFP said, that's fantastic, that's really good. They said, the problem is, your 1 million are those people who've got 5,000 feet. Okay, there. I.e., we don't need people with helicopters, we only do with fuel and everything else, okay? So WFP said, okay. Okay. Right, water and sanitation, big issue. Because people need water, all sorts of reasons. I've just made myself a cup of tea. Okay, you need water, priority. 95% of if you have a camp, it's a football pitch. It's a football pitch. It's a stadium. It's not designed for us putting in 10,000 people. You know, it's not designed for water. It's not designed for loos or any of these things. Okay, so you have to build them. Right? Now again, I'm going to ask you for your exercise stuff. Had you even thought about loos? Okay. You need to think about who's going to put them in, what are they going to look like, and so on and so forth. Okay. Clean water supply, perfect. Education. We talked a lot about education, and I've said to you, that it doesn't need much effort. And what does it do? What are the 2 things that I said to you? Have you opened the school? What does it do?
Keeps kids off the street.
Keeps kids off the street. And second one?
Gives time to the
Give time to the parents. Absolutely right. Let mum have some breathing time, and it gets the kids off the streets. Okay. So education. We just converted some tents. That's a school. Okay? Just a tent. Just put kids in there and have somebody stands in front of them who talks to them, preferably in their own language. And be very careful about people flooding the market with books, sending books and books and books. Unless they're in the local language, they're a waste of time. They'll burn them on the fire. Okay? Simple. So, I love the little bit. You can tell how many pupils are in there, okay? Because they're all their shoes there, okay? You see, it's so simple. You can take kids of any age. The important thing about this one here is you can get women in there. You don't have to be a qualified teacher. You could just get a woman who says, yeah, I'll look after the kids. You know, I've got 10 of my own. I know how to look after 10 kids. And you can give her every encouragement. This one I put in because I know this fellow well. But the story behind this, I think, is superb. This fellow here, his school, and these kids are from his school, was totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. There was a school day, and many kids died in amongst the stones. And what he did, and I thought was a very brave thing to do, he got all the kids who had survived and said, look, we're going to pretend there wasn't an earthquake. We'll all come to school on the rubble where some of them, your friends are still, we're going to have school in the rubble. We're going to pretend, we're going to come here at 8 o'clock in the morning, we're going to stay till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to do exactly as we did before the earthquake. And I thought it was incredible. Here when I went to see him, the kids couldn't understand why this is so white and his is so black, okay? And so many of these kids came up to me, right, and put their fingers through mine, so did it feel like his? By the time I left there, my beard was blacker than his. All these sticky fingers had gone through my beard, but there we are. Education, very, very important. We reopened 209 schools. Just the initiative, the schools are there, okay? Or parts of the schools are there. Certainly the class lists are there. It doesn't take much to get it going. Reopened 209 and got almost 1 million kids in school. 1 million kids, giving them something to do and giving their parents some time off. Yeah? Doesn't take much. Really good stuff. Protection was an important issue. Protection of women. Now what happened here is that many of the men stayed in the villages and didn't come into the camps for 2 reasons. First of all, the obvious one, they want to rebuild what's there. But very, very importantly, in Pakistan, there are no deeds of right for your house. You have the right to have the house by possession. So if in fact you move out, right, somebody else moves in, they got it by possession. So the men would stay, at least one man would stay amongst the rubble to make sure that nobody else came and tried to claim their property. Which meant that there were a lot of women in the camps who were unaccompanied, vulnerable for all sorts of reasons. Okay, vulnerable first and foremost because they never acted as head of household, because the husband had always done head of household. Now in the camp they're head of household, so all those head of household decisions was the food, how do I go and collect it, where do I bring it, and all. You have to get outside to do it. And lots of these women had been outside. Okay, so it was a change of structure for the women, and it made them much more vulnerable psychologically, sexually, and whatever. So protection became a very big issue, a very, very big issue. We identified altogether a very modest 2,000 who were at greatest risk. Those, of course, that were inside the Islamic camps, there was no protection problem. They were, if you like, they were tremendously overprotected. They would have loved to have been outside and had a bit more risk, I suspect. Logistics, you've got a logistic problem. You know what the score is. You know what you've got available, right? We had 20 UN helicopters and 10 US Chinooks. That's a Chinook. It can swing 3 loads. What did I tell you about the terrain? Do you remember? It was in valleys. Okay. What's the problem in the valley? Wind. The wind goes howling through. Okay. Now, generally speaking, it howls through in one direction. Therefore, you have to work out which direction you're going to put the helicopters in. Helicopters they're pretty easy. They can cope with lots and lots of wind problems, but not when you're carrying these underslung loads, because they begin to swing. And if you're not careful, they'll turn the helicopter over. Or they'll bend it, they put it on angles which it doesn't want to be on. But that became a big problem to us, and one which you haven't thought of initially. You have to sort of work out, okay, how are we going to have up lanes and down lanes? Can you, if you're flying one of these big ones, can you fly one of these small ones in the same valley? All of these things we had to learn to do. You've got stuff that's after your thing. If you haven't got helicopters, ask if you've got helicopters. Ask if there's any left. It's so, so useful. I tell this story only because it's true. It's true. There's one in there, there's a baby. And the baby was unwell. Very unwell. And so we were asked if we could casevac the baby from Kashmir down to Islamabad. Yes, of course we can, okay? And the mother said, can I go with the baby? Of course you can go with the baby. And the husband said, oh, can I go with my wife? And we said, of course you can go with your wife. And then he said, but my mum and dad live with us. Can my mum and dad come with us? And then actually my wife's sisters, and before we knew where we were, this is it. Only one child and there's a baby in there that's sick. The rest of them have all got good reasons for going, okay? Everybody has good reasons. But it's hard to kick them off, okay? And if they say, well, we can't go without, unless we all go, the baby dies. Now it's a bit blackmail, really. And you might have to be ruthless and say, stop it, you know, simple as that. But actually that one flew and people had. This is the helicopter the sort of helicopter that brought in normally 3 to 5 ton loads, but it also brought in the medical teams. Okay, dropped them off, picked them up, dropped them off, picked them up. Okay, so really superb work. Couldn't have done without, no doubt about that. In the case of the UN guys, it was quite fascinating because their helicopters, they were all retired Vietnamese vets. And of course, if you think about it, the territory is pretty similar to Vietnam. It's mountains and whatever. And these guys were able to really maneuver these helicopters up and down the terrain and enjoy. It brought back sweet memories to them. Something that, incidentally, today is the anniversary of the Dien Bien Phu, the loss of the French army in Dien Bien Phu. On we go. Challenges. These are some of the challenges that we had. Tony should be here for this one. Assessment and monitoring. Because you've got programs all over the place, how do you assess and monitor? Now, because Tony's here, I will tell you, I couldn't give a damn effort in my life about assessing and monitoring. I'm not interested in it at all, okay? Because at my stage of the game, I'm emergency and emergency only. As far as I'm concerned, kick, push, get the thing done, and let somebody like Tony worry about it afterwards. Okay, simple as that. But Tony would say, you can't do that. You've got to assess all the time, monitor all the time, assess all the time, write it down, improve, and so on and so forth. You get Tony next Friday, I think it is, okay? You'll listen to Tony's version. But Tony does it by the book. He's also very good out of the book, there's no question about it, but he does believe in assessment and monitoring. No interest in it. Heating and fire safety. I told you we were not allowed to heat the tents. UNHCR, young man in UNHCR decided either he'd forgotten this rule or he decided he was going to break it. He bought these little kerosene heaters. Okay, and so he issued them out in one camp to every tent. Every tent had a kerosene heater. Fine, everybody said, that's marvellous. What you need if you've got a kerosene heater? Kerosene. Okay, you need kerosene. It's a great idea having a kerosene heater, but you need kerosene. Okay, so if you need kerosene, you buy some kerosene, right? What's the next problem, right? Where can you store it? Okay, you need a kerosene, you need a tank or something to put it in. Okay, so you've got kerosene and you've got your stove. Then, of course, you've got a fire problem. Okay, so you buy a bucket, and then you buy some of these. This program cost a fortune and was against the government's. It was against the government's rules. Okay, so you have to curb people's enthusiasm. No doubt about it. Curb some people's, and this afternoon you have to do the same with yours. This is what we're quite happy to do. Build a stove outside. Okay, so during the day, they're out, they go, they get warmth and heat from that, they do all the cooking from outside, and it's actually outside. That's what you're hoping. Okay, that is what it's all about. Pakistan, Kashmir, very conservative. Almost all of the field hospitals that we deployed, the staff were male, okay? And so there were a lot of women who were unwell, whose husbands would not allow them to go to the doctor. So there was an enormous shortage of female doctors. Those hospitals that had nurses, female nurses, they did superbly well. Yeah, we're getting much better at it now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But at that time, it was a difficult one. My favourite story about this is absolutely true. The only hospital, field hospital, that had something like a 60-40 ratio of women to men was the Cuban hospital. Cuba exports doctors. I mean, it trains lots and lots of doctors, gets an enormous income by sending doctors overseas. And this hospital had, say, 60-40. It was really superb. It contravened every rule in the book, right, for Pakistan, in so much as it was blurring loud music, samba music all day long, okay? But also, they all wore shorts, right? The girls wore shorts, the girls wore T-shirts. Something, I don't know, which is anatomically different about these girls in Cuba than the rest of the world. They're rather bosomy, shall we say, okay, these girls. They're rather large girls. What was fascinating is every Pakistan male, right, wanted to visit the hospital to see the Cubans. So many Muslim women, there was nothing wrong with them at all. They were dragged along to the Cuban hospital by their husbands. That's how you get in. I mean, simple as that.
It's a win-win, right?
Win-win. There you are. So, So funny, so funny. Okay, these were the criticisms at the end of the day, which, and they get these are all things that Tony would come up with, and he's absolutely right. Okay, this would be in Tony's report. Absolutely right. Initially, lack of engagement with local authorities and agencies. I told you, we almost ignored the 115 local NGOs. It took us a little while before we realized, good God, we should be talking to these agencies. That is a fact of life. The other thing is, Kashmir, it had its own council, it had all sorts of offices and so on and so forth. When we went in, even though we had to sit around this table, which was in Islamabad, don't forget, when we got up to Kashmir, sometimes we forgot about the locals. I would agree. I mean, it's a person which is always there, and I ask you to think about it on the exercise this afternoon. Because remember, Richard said to you a couple of days ago, who are you dealing with? Why are you there? What's the purpose? What's the aim? What did you work out was your mission? Do you remember what it said? What's your mission said?
Our mission,
Yeah,
although
right.
written,
right.
or your mission.
No, the mission that you were given.
To access.
What was it?
To assist the
To
southern
assist.
region.
Okay, that's it. To assist the southern region. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, you've got to liaise with them. Okay? Everything you do, you have to liaise with them. Simple as that. All right. So that was true. Next one is too many independent assessments. Now, even Tony would have to go along with this, okay? Almost every agency sent somebody out to assess. Now, the only agency that, in my opinion, got real great credit was Oxfam. Barbara Stocking is the girl that was running at the time. Barbara Stocking came out. Now, like every other agency, she saw a great opportunity for publicity and everything else. She looked around and she said, everything that we do is being covered by everybody else. We're not coming. And that took courage. People said, oh, you've got to be there, show the flag and everything else. She said, it's all being done by somebody else. We're not going to go. So that was bold, that was brave, and that's what should have happened. Too many independent assessments, okay? Insufficient capacity building initiatives. We're getting better at this. We're getting much better at it now. We talk more and more about localization. For your exercise, how are you going to get the locals involved? I mean, are you going to come in and solve this for 12 weeks and then go away and leave it there? Or are you going to come in and immediately start capacity building? Places that I have been, Palestine for me, what you've got to do is you've got to find out who normally does this and then help them. I can give a better example. Iraq. Iraq has been wasted. No question. Every office you went into, there were empty, bare, no windows, no chairs, no nothing, right? And all you need to, we could sit down and make decisions much more quickly than you could get a local to sit with you and teach and talk the local through. But you're moving away. The job is to sit down. It takes more time, okay? Sit down and say, okay, you need a pencil, you need paper, you need simple things, okay? If we can get a mobile phone in here, we'll get a mobile phone. Build up the local initiative. That's what it's all about. It's much more important than looking after yourself and then moving away in the place, falling apart. Simple as that. Whoa. Too many meetings. Now, I told you, we just introduced the cluster system. Now, the cluster system then was in its infancy, but nevertheless, we still got enormous numbers of people at the clusters. We weren't clever enough then. In some of the clusters in Haiti, which I'll talk about tomorrow, there were as many as 700 or 800 people. Okay, now you can't do that. There's no way in the world you can do it. I'll probably leave it till tomorrow to tell you how we solved it. How we solved it there, but not how we solved it here. Here we had too many meetings, but also enormous shortage of interpreters. Now the problem with that, therefore, is that we had it in English, and therefore, okay, a bit difficult maybe for the French and the Spanish and all the other agencies that had responded, but it was dreadful for the locals, okay? And sometimes, they'd sit there and wonder what's going on. And we wouldn't, they went away with not knowing what had happened. Now, of course, it's much better because what Ulster does now is every meeting is recorded, every meeting goes online, and it's translated. Okay, every meeting. So every meeting, everybody knows what it's all about. We didn't do that there. We didn't have enough interpreters, but we learned. Simple. Because we're so busy, very often then, to do it now, because it's easier. It's easier with the equipment we've got. But then things had to be written out. They had no time. So very often there was no minutes. So simple as that. You'd go from one meeting to the other, so you wouldn't get around to doing the minutes of the meeting. It was a very valid criticism. Local NGOs must be included. Yeah, absolutely right. These days, you can't do anything without them. Eventually, in Pakistan, the General Nasti said every cluster must have, as a deputy, a Pakistan military. Now, I was delighted with this, because what it did mean is that if he sat there, it meant that he took part responsibility, because he could go back and tell them, this is what they said. So sometimes when he said to me, "We didn't know that was happening," I said, "He had a representative there. Okay. You had a guy there. Why didn't he take it? Don't show to me." So it was very important to have somebody there. In many places today, we put the local in charge. Locals in charge, we sit next to them. Something like that. It's very, very wise. Very, very wise. Okay. This is very interesting. This was one of sort of Tony's assessments afterwards. 60 to 80% of the effective response was not external. The majority of the response was done by Pakistanis. Okay, we take all the credit. We think we did all this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, probably, according to Tony and his crew, 60 to 80% of the response was external. Yep. I think actually we're coming. How are we doing for time, sir?
We're absolutely coming into land, so that's fine.
Perfect, because this is the last
Yeah,
slide.
yeah.
It's the last slide. Okay. So at the end of it, the Pakistan Prime Minister gave a summary of 12 lessons learned, and I put up the three most important ones for us. The first one is everybody must have a clear mandate, i.e., Children's Fund. What's the mandate of the Children's Fund? Children! Okay. What's the mandate of the World Food Programme? Food! Okay. You've got to have a mandate. Okay. And you've got to know what your mandate is. And the reason why is because it's so easy to stray from your mandate and take in more and more, which you're not an expert in. Okay. You're not an expert in. Stick to your mandate. The approach of one size fits all is not correct. Now, this General Nasty, some people around the table in their great naivety would say, in Bosnia we did this, or in the Congo, he would say, you're not in the Congo, you're not in Bosnia. I don't want a one size fit all, I want a solution for Pakistan. And that's true. Yeah? You need a local situation, a local solution, simple as that. Okay? Must have a permanent, now this was the biggest thing he did, and of course this is the thing that really, really pleases Richard at the back there. They said, we haven't got a disaster management authority. We need a disaster management authority. And they set one up with well-qualified staff. And so they've set it up. They've got now, I think it's still got it, haven't they? The National Disaster Management.
This year, they're actually reviewing their national plan.
There you are, okay? So, this came out of it, and I can tell you, a number of countries saw this and said, aha, okay, that's the big lesson learned, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to have, and we'll see tomorrow whether Haiti had taken any notice of it at all. We've now solved the Kashmir problem. Well done. Okay, sir?
Round of applause, please.
While he gets his breath back.
Thank you. It is coffee time, but are there any questions, anything you just want to have a chance to ask? Larry's not disappearing, he's here for the rest of the day, but if there's anything you want to ask.
I was just going to say, in looking back, obviously having what seems like a relatively well-resourced and coordinated military, was that overall, do you think, helpful or more of a hindrance to your operation?
Oh, I think it solved it. But we could not have done it without them. Okay, simple as that. No way. First of all, we would never have been allowed up there.
Yeah.
But that's the first point, because it was a disputed area. Secondly, there would have been a reluctance for people to go up there, I think. But they were superb. They were very, very good. Once we realised what the system was, once every day, they got fed up of arguing with the general. But he was right. It's their country. It is their country. Okay. I'm arguing with him because this is the way I know we can do it. But if he was right, it may not be the best way for him. I mean, simple as that.
Yeah.
One of the funny stories which I should have told you, which I love, is that we need to get transport up the 5,000 feet, and that was very, very difficult because you needed vehicles. And a classic example of you needed the vehicles that the locals had because it's very narrow. You saw the roads. I mean, you needed those vehicles. So going up the 5,000 meters, we said, okay, what we'll do is we'll use donkeys. No problem at all, because they use donkeys there. They often get all the loads of donkeys. There weren't enough donkeys, so we got some donkeys from South Pakistan, and we brought them up. We took them up, and we loaded them up, and we took them out, and they said, you've got to be joking, you've got to be joking. These donkeys said, no, we're flatland donkeys, we're not going over the side. And they said, no way, they wouldn't move. They would not move. The moment they got there, they were all sort of scared of heights. It was quite fascinating. Lovely decision, but they came, asked the locals, why don't you have donkeys from the south?
Yeah.
Okay, you didn't ask them.
Linked to Lauren's question, it's a very important point. Obviously, the military are the solution to everyone's problems, but that's not what we have a military for. So we're always taught, plan with the military, do not depend upon the military. But the question I suppose I wanted to ask for Pakistan, because they were so involved in the response. At what point did General Musharraf say, okay, generals, now you're pulling back, ministries now come forward in that sort of transition phase?
It didn't happen at all in his regime, not in his whole regime. That was the truth.
Yeah.
It never happened. I mean, it was a military dictatorship, and I think until fairly recently, the generals or ex-generals that run the show. And many people would say, even now with the civilian in charge, it's the generals who have the say.
And that's the problem.
I think that's the truth of it. Yeah. And so if anything happened again, we could do the same thing.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is that people like the General Nasty. I mean, people have said to me afterwards, well, of course, he knew full well, Omar, whatever his name is, he knew where all the Taliban were and everything else. He probably did. I mean, he was from Kashmir. He knew who they were hiding, where they were hiding them, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's the internal politics, and we're not there to solve the internal politics.
No.
It's a crisis for humanitarians, therefore we're sticking to the humanitarian side.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So,
Chris.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. So I was just wondering, you were talking about that decision to feed the temporary or spontaneous camps to provide support to the spontaneous camps.
Yep.
And you said that when you were told you weren't allowed to step in, that the Islamic Aid Agency stepped in, and you suggested that was problematic for the Pakistani government.
It was.
Can you just
mainly because, I mean, simply and purely because it's pretty obvious that they were very strong, militant Islamic.
The agencies themselves?
What they did, of course, is they created NGOs. So these were new NGOs that were looking after the camp. So they would say, we are Slaves of God agency, or we are whatever. They created the names of agencies so that they would look as if they were independent, neutral agencies, but they weren't. They were all rabid Islamists. Simply recognizable immediately by the fact that every woman wore a burqa. In all the other camps, you could see some did, and some, but it was a relaxation in there. But there wasn't in those camps. And also they flew a green flag. And so it was a problem. Now some of them were closed down, but it's a tricky thing. And again, I would think that behind the scenes, these two generals must have all argued and fought all day and every day, because I'm pretty certain that General Nasty was aware of what these camps were doing and was quite happy about it, but didn't want to say, yes, I'm happy about it. But it was Islamic relief being shown. It was the faith was looking after the faithful. That's what it was. Okay, but in our eyes, it was the extreme faith looking after and trying to make people extremely faithful.
Sorry, this is just fascinating. So
No.
do you know if it was it Kashmiri, Pakistani, or Afghani? Was it?
Yeah, no, but I've got this counter-terrorism background.
Yeah, sorry.
I would say.
Sorry, I'm sorry for just jumping in here.
No. I mean, the answer is I don't know. At the time, we were told that they came up from the south. I mean, that they were southern Pakistanis. They were not. They were not. They were not from Kashmir.
Right.
And we were led to believe that they weren't from over the border in Afghanistan. We were told that they'd come up from south of Islamabad. But I couldn't verify that. I mean, we were never allowed in.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was the truth. They never allowed us in or anybody near them. I didn't see many of them. I mean, they had this closure procedure, but I didn't see many of them closed. But we were just forbidden to participate. It may well have been we were forbidden to participate if they liked it and didn't want to interfere. Something like that. They did not want, maybe just simply because they did not want the West to get the credit for feeding these other camps.